This video is a continuation from the previous. Okay. There we go. Okay, so points. What we are going to represent as dots, and when I say dots, I mean symbolically. So most of the time when we start off intending to express ourselves artistically, we start off with points. And for instance, the point itself is the starting place. If you have a pencil, you put it down somewhere. If you have a cursor, you click it somewhere, right? So we always start with a point in space. And then from there, points create lines. Lines create shapes. Shapes create forms. And as we talked about, because points are abstract and invisible, we use dots or some variation of the dot to represent them. And dots are considered an element of design, and they have been used since the very beginning of design, human design, right? So other animals have been around longer than we have, and they design in a different way than we do. And there are studies that show that there are birds, right? So I'm sure you guys have seen those documentaries on birds that build and then decorate nests. So we are not alone. It would be interesting to see if they follow the principles and elements of design. Because I'm going to guess Gestalt is different for birds than it is for humans because we have different brains. So here are two examples of dots. Andy Warhol used dots, and here is artwork by Cinco Garcia, including dots. Actually, he used dots here as texture. Points, dots, can be represented as circles, blobs, brush strokes, and these are examples above. Splatters, drips, ovals, the end of a pencil, sharpened or unsharpened, tick marks, and these are unsharpened pencils that it's referencing. Tick marks, pinpricks through paper, drops of liquid, hole punches, scratches, arrows, symbols, and more. And the more means anything else you can think of. It works. And that's one of the beautiful things about design, art and design, is we're not limited. You can think beyond what is listed here. Essentially, your use of points as a design element is unlimited. In the middle here, this image of the people on the grass is Pointillism, which was a style of art and design that came after the French Impressionists, that is comprised of nothing but points. That whole painting, if you got up really close to it, it's nothing but dots, just dots everywhere. Points in architecture have dimensions in proportion with infinite possible combinations. And here is in the middle here, you see it's talking about Le Corbusier's 5 points toward a modern architecture. And he talks about the layout of points in plan, in perspective, and in range to the facade of a building. And he's, as you can see, he's very much working on a grid. And grids intersect, lines of grids intersect, and where they intersect create points, and we can connect those points as it was done in the buildings to the left to create architecture. And so this is essentially the origin of modern architecture, is thinking of architecture in terms of, well, not just points, but the principles and elements of design. But starting with the point. The point is the basis, because how we connect those points start to form floor systems and column systems and roof systems, where our doors go, where our openings are. So Okay, so that's the point. Now, the point after the point, we're gonna talk about lines. And so you see in the middle, there's some examples of lines, and you see that lines are not necessarily straight. They can have, obviously they have length, and they're more length than thickness, but they can have a thickness. They can be unbroken, solid. They can be broken. They can be implied. Line can be vertical, diagonal, horizontal. It can be curved. It can be any width, size, shape, position, direction, interval, or density. And lines are essentially just, like we talked about, it's created from a series of points. If you're taking a brush and it's dipped in ink and you put it down on the paper, you've created a point. Now drag it, and that's the motion, and that becomes your line. And there's some, over here on the right, there's some even more examples. These are all lines. A line can have other elements. So it's not just, lines aren't just necessarily single color, right? It can have an other element like color or texture applied to it. And so what lines can do, in addition to being lines, being boundaries, is they can actually control the way someone looks through your work. They can lead your eye. And I talked a little bit about this, about wayfinding in buildings. How do I know where the door is? Well, you can do it through color, but say your homeowner absolutely does not want a red door. They want, a beige door. Then how do you recognize a beige house with a beige door? How do you recognize where the entrance is? And you could do that with leading lines. And when we look at work by Frank Lloyd Wright, he used a lot of very long horizontal lines to lead the eye. Breaks in lines also denote breaks in space, and so we can use lines to denote those things as well. And so this is a Le Rêve by Picasso, which means the dream. And so he used lines here in his work, and you can see the thickness changes of the line. The line starts off thin and it gets thicker. It changes color, it changes direction, it changes shape, and then it becomes more two-dimensional. And so people, and again, and I'm just going to keep fixing this because it drives me nuts. Anyway, so it's great example of line work. He's got all these different lines, and so you can see all these different lines that he has put into his painting. Oh, I'm sorry. I was like looking at that first and thinking it was a cave, like a slot canyon. Sorry. And I was like, why did I put a slot canyon in here? It's a building. Okay, so and then here you see if you look at everything in here from the bookshelves up the walls, that looks like a slot canyon. If you guys Google slot canyon, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you haven't been in one, there's a very famous one, Antelope Canyon, out in Arizona, and it's expensive. You can go in it, and it's just incredible because the sun will come through while you're in it and cast light and shadows. It's really, really, really incredible. It looks like the walls begin to move. They're obviously not moving, but this must have been an influence on this. But you can see the lines in the architecture in the building here, and how that creates those different planes and gives that an illusion of space. Okay. Shape. So all objects are comprised of shapes, and all elements of design are shapes in some way. Even dots and lines. A shape is a two-dimensional object that stands out from the space next to it because of a defined or an implied boundary. So either we have defined the outer edges of a shape very, very clearly, or we have implied it. A shape can live in different areas in space and have other elements like line, color, texture, or movement. And this very famous painting, also by Picasso, is made out of nothing but shapes. And he's got a couple of lines in there, but for the most part, we've got a bunch of shapes here. And shapes come in two main different types, geometric and organic. And geometric shapes are those that can be drawn using a ruler, a compass, a digital instrument. They're very precise, like an architectural rendering can be. They are created in CAD or by hand. They're controlled, they're orderly. Whereas organic shapes are found in nature or drawn by hand without instrumentation. They're considered to be the opposite of geometric, and they feel natural or smooth. And they can be less complex, but they can also be more complex. So, for instance, Japanese architecture, they use very geometric design and layout for their buildings that humans build, but their gardens that they put them in are extremely organic, and as a result they create that contrast between man-made and nature to differentiate it. Yayoi Kusama is very well known for, she's considered for her dots, but she mainly does shapes. Dots are just one of her shapes. And so you will probably hear about her, see her work around. She has started doing these interior design style rooms with her work. And so that's one of the reasons we're going to look at her a little bit more, because her work is sort of on that edge between interior design and art, in the sense of where they meet and begin to overlap. And I think it's important when you're learning to be creative that you don't set those kinds of hard boundaries. So we're not going to. And then the Feral Residences by Architect 61. They designed their two symmetrical towers to do, kind of like what Frank Gehry did, right? Where with Fred and Ginger and had them dancing. These two are just sort of embracing, the outline of this is kind of humanoid, and they rotated the planes as they went up to create that. And so it says there are 2 units per level, which you can see that here. There are 2. I'm not sure where they divide. That's interesting. Looks like 1 to me. Maybe that's a penthouse. But they said there's 2 different residences per level. Residence on this side, residence on this side. And then they can see all the way through. Light comes all the way through. So it brings in more light and air, and they get 270 views of Singapore. And they also have a terrace, a jet pool, a spa, a jacuzzi. Wow. Must be nice. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one here, and we'll continue in the next video.